Grandpas are known for making sure the dining table was set and stacked with hearty breakfasts for us. Let's go through some dishes they used to cook up to ensure our day got off to the right start. So the first breakfast on our list is classic biscuits and gravy. Now our grandfathers would love to serve this hearty breakfast because of how convenient it was to make. Putting together readily available biscuits like Jacob's crackers or plain graham crackers with the thickest sausage gravy you had ever laid your eyes on. This went perfectly back in the 20th century, though it would be considered slightly out of fashion today, but you could still find many households that serve up foods like this as an afternoon lunch or as a snack, often when there was nothing else to eat, or if you wanted to make sure they were leaving home with something in their stomachs, you would put some biscuits and gravy on the table. It worked really well as an appetizer, or just a meal to converse over while you had some tea or juice, since grandparents would usually keep the fridges stocked full of at least one kind of juice. Besides just using traditional flour, eggs, and butter for pancakes, people back then also enjoyed making buckwheat pancakes, which were less common. These would, as the name implies, involve buckwheat being used in the cooking process, and the outcome of it was actually pretty delectable. People would love the nutty texture that these pancakes would provide, and everyone was always looking for a way to freshen up their favorite American breakfast anyway. Buckwheat pancakes with a chocolate spread or butter made for the perfect breakfast to start your day right. The extra dose of fiber kept you full and energized throughout the day. It was common to have these pancakes with a side of sausages or English muffins, and if you recreate this today, you'll find a comforting breakfast experience that you might consider keeping in your weekly rotation. The next on our list are some classic country fried steak and eggs with a breadcrumb twist that gives this staple meal a new personality with an exciting crunch. Think of it like eating a slightly crispier steak. Depending on how much breading you choose to use with the steak, the result is a steak that is not chewy or one that needs to be torn rigorously, but one that simply falls apart in your mouth very smoothly. When you pair that up with the delicious gravy that would work just as well with some mashed potatoes as a side, you get one of the 90s best hits. For good reason too, it is hard to make a dish that takes care of everything in one fell swoop. You have your nutrition ticked off, it gets you full. It is not too expensive to make, and the kids love it. One has to wonder what more you could ask from a dish. Buttermilk pancakes were a great alternative to buckwheat pancakes if you got tired of those, and this is for all the people that love having a much sweeter kick to start their day with. If you have never been familiar with the magic that some simple buttermilk can add to your pancakes, then you need to get yourself acquainted. Grandpas in the 90s would often specifically look for buttermilk in stores, and housewives would have it tacked onto the grocery list despite it costing a little bit more than your more basic ingredients. Especially if it was a guarantee that the grandkids and family were coming over this week, then you could not avoid splurging a little more on stuff like this. Whether it is the 90s or the 2020s, nothing beats pancakes made straight from your grandparents' hand, and that goes triple for buttermilk ones. Let's say you have a more active lifestyle, and you want to do away with the pancakes and fried stuff for breakfast. You can always try out a classic recipe for oatmeal made with brown sugar and cream, which not only makes oatmeal a lot more interesting than it would be on its own, but ticks off the health boxes. You get your protein, you get your fiber, and you get your taste buds satisfied. Whether you are an adult or a kid, that is a pretty good deal, but especially if you are trying to cut some weight and get into the gym more regularly. Grandparents would typically be aware of that, or that kids would come around to the need of physical activity soon enough, so they would make sure their grandchildren had at least 2 or 3 bowls a week of oatmeal. It was pretty hard to get them to eat it though, so the addition of brown sugar and cream was a godsend. So let's get back into some really good breakfast options with sausages and scrambled eggs, which you might have grown up seeing not just humans eat, but cartoon characters, people in movies, and in magazines and ads. There is a good reason for that, and it is because sausages and scrambled eggs were the perfect working-class breakfast. It took very little time to make while you would get ready for your shift, and it took even less time to eat. You will notice that most meals on this list try to strike a balance between taste and prep time, and that is because most of them are made with simple ingredients and recipes. Quick dishes that can help you get a breakfast in without needing you to stay half an hour or more in the kitchen. Top that off with some sauce or gravy if you have any leftovers, as gravy was a staple of many dishes back then, and you had yourself a solid meal. While we are on the topic of what goes great with eggs, let's talk about how nice ham and eggs are. Few dishes can stand the test of time as well as ham, steak, and eggs have done, and we think it is because they can be so versatile. You can have your eggs done with just the whites, a fluffy yolk, an omelette, or sunny side up. The ham steak could be cooked according to your preference too, and all variations of the dish took roughly the same amount of effort. It was a dish that had mass appeal built into it, and the best part was that it was affordable. If you could not spare the budget for some real steak, then ham steak would come close enough to satisfy those cravings. Sausage gravy over toasted bread is a traditional Southern breakfast that for a long time was the heart and soul of the South, especially in places like Texas. You should not confuse this with country gravy because there is a stark difference between the two. See, country gravy does not have the juicy, mouth-watering, glorious addition of animal fat involved in the process. Sausage gravy, on the other hand, uses loose pork sausages, and once the meat is rendered, it takes the fat and mixes it with flour to make the roux and thicken the gravy. You pair that up with some perfectly golden brown toasted bread, and you are in for a world of culinary delight. The best part was that you could amp up the smoky sausage flavor by just adding more sausage to the gravy or keep it toned down for a milder taste. Either way, an incredibly yummy and economical breakfast. Here is one for our fans who love ranch-style eggs and cannot go without them. Huevos Rancheros was an incredible dish that would be served on Mexican rural farms and was very popular in Latin American communities. It was a conventional egg dish made in the style of traditional large mid-morning fare. You can keep it simple and traditional with some fried eggs served on a charred corn or flour tortilla base with a spicy salsa, or keep experimenting. There are lots of options to play around with too, like Mexican-style rice, guacamole, and avocado. This takes a bit more effort than anything else on the list so far, but if you are willing to put in the work, you will find an egg dish like none you have ever had before. Grits are a kind of porridge that is made with dried maize or hominy, and it has to be this really fine, coarsely ground maize. Usually, the type that is used is treated with alkali, and they are made with warm salted water or milk, but on its own it has all the appeal of oatmeal, which is not much to say the least. Sure, porridge works, but it needs a team of other things to really make it shine. Grits made with an eggs Benedict or fried eggs would often work really well, and the porridge had one strong redeeming factor. It was much more creamy than you would usually expect porridge made with water to be, and that is because the grits release their starch, which makes the consistency a lot thicker. Fried potatoes and onions were a 1920s classic, especially during the recession, which made it very difficult to get most basic ingredients. You could forget about buttermilk pancakes or nice cuts of steak. People were lucky enough to scrounge up enough potatoes for the week. However, the same mashed potatoes 5 times a week can get pretty dull, so people had to find all kinds of ways to spice things up that involved more than just a tad more black pepper. What they found out was that cutting potatoes into cubes and frying them with onions along with some bread made for a phenomenal combo, and if they had the oil to spare, it created a better texture for the dish. This was affordable enough that people could have it without worrying and tasty enough that it would ease your tensions for a while. Breakfast burritos are something that we still have regularly in today's modern world, and the trend has continued steadily, despite being introduced all the way back in the 1970s in New Mexico. You go south enough, you will only see bacon and eggs, whereas the opposite end has its fair share of tortilla-based goodness. New Mexico was a state where American, Mexican, and Latin cultures met and melted together in one pot, and we got things like the breakfast burrito out of it. Bacon, eggs, and vegetables in a tortilla with salsa poured over or served on the side as a dip was one of the best parts about being alive in the 70s, back when they didn't hold back on the spice. There are many debates as to who made the first proper eggs Benedict. Some people say it was Delmonico's in Lower Manhattan that first put out a Benedict on its menus. Some say one of their chefs, Charles Ranhofer, was the one who brought this dish to the center stage when he published his recipe for eggs à la Benedict in 1894. It is one of the most scrumptious delicacies available in the world, and it has many kinds of flavors to keep your attention span in one place. Notes of lemon paired with the buttery and creamy hollandaise sauce make for an explosively tasty dish, and that is still not its most appealing factor. Despite how it looks and sounds, with the sauce being the most time-consuming part. The perfect dessert to satisfy your sweet tooth were some grade A blueberry muffins stuffed to the brim with fresh berries. Whenever you would head on over to your grandpa's for some much-needed family time, you could always expect to see a basket full of these right out of the oven. Home chefs and housewives in particular swore by their preserved blueberry muffin recipes, which they would keep a secret and pass down like a family heirloom to their kids. Maybe that is a good thing too, since gatekeeping your grandma's blueberry muffins makes it all the more nostalgic in a strange way. People wanted more out of their muffins than the simple ones they were used to, and the idea of adding berries to them breathed new life into muffins as a whole, which brought them back on equal footing with cookies and biscuits. Quiche Lorraines were made of these flaky pastry crusts that would be filled to the max with savory egg custards and cheese as well as bacon. It was incredibly popular in French-American neighborhoods and restaurants since it was originally a European dish, but it does not take a genius to figure out that Americans would love this too. Essentially, it is a tart or pie with a meaty egg filling, which sounds incredible and tastes even better. You can eat this cold or hot, it is up to you, and the choice of meat is yours to decide too. Most restaurants let you choose between bacon, ham, or pork, and the dish is a bit hard, but if you can follow a recipe, making this at home gives you liberty with every aspect of the dish. Housewives would very regularly create their own takes on Quiche Lorraines, some of which were better than what you would find in a fine establishment. Hash browns were the perfect meal to get when you were craving food that would make you happy as soon as you took that first bite. Shredded and diced potato fried into what is essentially a big fat potato nugget. Hash browns tasted all the better when they were coming from your beloved grandma, and when she went all in with the spices. They were the kind of potato-filled goodness to even put hash browns from McDonald's to shame. And whatever hour of the day it was, there was never a wrong time to indulge in them. Hash browns have been a classic of American cuisine since 1895, and we think they'll be around well into 2095 too, if we ever get that far. You do not stumble upon comfort food like this in every generation after all. Maybe you do not want to blow away your taste buds right as you wake up and just want a tamer breakfast that still has a good bit of flavor to brag about. You could always go for a simple omelet and up the wow factor by folding it around some melted cheese. Cooks that were confident in the speed of their knife skills could go for some diced vegetables and meats and really get the dish going in full stride, and it was a delight every time. Americans do not play about their cheese, and almost every typical American breakfast you can think of has a cheese variation out there that makes it infinitely better. Omelets are not any kind of exception, and it would barely take a minute to mix the cheese in anyway. Maple bacon is a kind of bacon that caters to both audiences. Whether or not you enjoyed savory dishes or sweeter ones, maple bacon thought to ask the question of why we could not have both and actually put some action behind that. It is glazed in maple syrup and usually served alongside some maple syrup too, and it adds a very nice, vibrant texture to the bacon. Have you ever had Thai chili sweet wings? It is kind of like that, but the glaze is a lot stronger and thicker. If you are a fan of savory dishes with a bit of a sweeter side to them, then this classic is definitely one for you, even if it is a bit forgotten. The name Toad in the Hole might make you raise a few eyebrows because you obviously did not sign up for eating any kind of amphibians or toads in your dish, but do not worry. The name is a bit misleading. What it actually refers to is an egg and toast cutout usually served with bacon or sausages, and the cutout is a hole in the center of the bread. While this might make you think of eggs in a basket or a bird's nest instead, it is not quite the same as either of the two. The name was pretty popular in North America, but people used to refer to this by many names like one-eyed pirate as well. You would typically pan-ear a sausage and link it in a piece of white bread for breakfast, but if you could not even get that done, then a toad in a hole was your savior. You should not confuse this with the British variant of the dish, which is just sausages and Yorkshire pudding, though you can still find that in British American communities throughout Northern America. Fried catfish would combine cornmeal, flour, and seafood seasoning, and then fill plastic bags with it while mixing fillets in the same bag. Then you would deep fry these catfish fillets and get the most crispy, tender cuts of seafood you have ever had. It was one of the best dishes to cook right after a fishing trip, since catfishes were a really common catch of the day, and camping trips were a regular grandpa-grandson hobby to take part in. Serving them alongside grits and spicing up the porridge to create a dip-like consistency brought the dish full circle and earned it a spot in vintage American breakfasts that might be forgotten now, but did wonders for people back then. While we do not expect you to have had toads in holes, do you ever remember waking up to aromatic deep-fried catfish with some thick, creamy grits? With that, we conclude our list of memorable breakfasts grandfathers just loved having. Give us a like, subscribe, and let's keep these memories alive.